Daniel had always been invisible. At 42, married for 7 years to Victoria, he and X 2019 perfected the art of disappearing. He came home from his accounting job, kissed her cheek, asked about her day, and listened to stories about her boutique clients while his mind drifted elsewhere. Their intimacy had become a practiced routine, and X 2014. Saturday nights, lights dimmed, her body mechanical and distant. Yet he never spoke of his loneliness. He never mentioned the woman from the marketing department who and X 2019 started lingering by his desk, asking his opinions, making him feel seen. It was on a forest walk, meant to clear his head, that everything changed. He saw her first as a shimmer between the trees, and X 2014, impossibly beautiful, with amber eyes that seemed to glow in the filtering sunlight. She wore a rust-colored dress that matched her hair, and she moved with an otherworldly grace. When she turned to look directly at him, Daniel felt his breath catch. And X 201C, you and X 2019, re-carrying something heavy, and X 201D, she said without preamble, her voice like wind through dried leaves. And X 201C, I and X 2019, am sorry, do I know you? And X 201D. Daniel stammered, but something in her gaze made him feel exposed, as though she could see through his carefully maintained exterior. She smiled, mysterious and knowing. And X 201C. Not yet. But you will. My name is Kess. And X 201D. She extended a pale hand, and when Daniel took it, warmth spread through his arm. And X 201C. You and X 2019. Rethinking about someone who makes you feel alive. You Haven and X 2019. T touched your wife in months, though you lay beside her. You wonder if you married the right person, and you and X 2019. Terrified that the answer is no, and X 201D. Daniel pulled his hand back, his face flushing. And X 201C. How could you possibly know that? And X 201D. And X 201C. I told you. I see what others carry. And X 201D. Kess tilted her head. And X 201C. Come find me tomorrow. Same time. There are things you need to understand about yourself. And X 201D. When Daniel returned home that evening, Victoria was reviewing sketches for new inventory. She barely glanced up. He thought about Kess and X 2019's impossible words, her unnerving accuracy, the way her presence had made him feel simultaneously terrified and alive. As he showered, he thought of her intensity, the way her eyes had held his. That night, he lay beside Victoria as they both stared at the ceiling, separated by more than the physical distance between them, and he made a decision. Tomorrow, he would return to the forest. They met every day for 2 weeks. Kess never touched him without asking, respecting boundaries while somehow reading them before he even knew they existed. She knew he hated his job, that he and X 2019 sacrificed his art degree to become respectable. She knew his father had told him that creative men were failures, that responsibility meant suffocation. She knew about Emma from marketing, how her interest made him feel important for the first time in years, how he and X 2019 entertained a fantasy so vivid it frightened him. And X 201C, you Haven and X 2019 acted on it, and X 201D, Kess said one afternoon as they sat by a moss-covered stream. And X 201C, that and X 2019 what matters. You and X 2019, a good man carrying guilt for things you Haven and X 2019 done. And X 201D. On the 15th day, Daniel broke. Victoria had called asking him to pick up catering for a dinner party she and X 2019 planned without consulting him. As he listened to her imperious voice on the phone, he felt something crack inside. That evening, in the forest clearing where Kes waited with candlelight strung between the trees, Daniel kissed her. She tasted like wildflowers and ancient earth. Her skin was soft, almost translucent, and she pressed against him with urgency, as if she and X 2019 been waiting for this moment forever. They moved to the ground, and Daniel felt something awaken in him that his marriage had long since buried. With Kes, there was no performance, no distance. She gasped his name not in practiced pleasure but in genuine connection. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the stars, and for the first time in years, Daniel felt like himself. And X201C, what are you? And X201D? He asked, running his fingers through her hair. And X201C, something that chose to love you, and X201D, she whispered. And X201C, but know this and X 2014, my ability, my gift, it doesn't and X 2019, work without honesty. I can sense your feelings, your regrets, your unspoken desires. But I cannot help you heal if you continue to lie. And X201D. And X201C. Lie to whom? And X201D. Daniel asked, though he already knew the answer. And X201C. Yourself primarily. But also to Victoria. And now you and X 2019. Rethinking about lies of a different kind. You and X 2019. Reimagining telling her, but you and X 2019. Also imagining something else. And X201D. Kes pulled back, her amber eyes searching his. And X201C. You and X 2019. Rethinking about staying with her. About keeping me a secret. You and X 2019. Reimagining having both of us. And X201D. Daniel didn't and X 2019. Deny it. The thought had crystallized in his mind with shocking clarity and absolute cowardice. And X201C. That path leads to destruction, and X201D, Kes said gently. And X201C. Not just for Victoria, but for you. For us. And X201D. She sat up, and in the candlelight, she looked less human and more like a creature of the forest itself. And X201C. My gift is tied to an ancient pact. I can only help those willing to face their truth. If you want me, you must choose. Completely. And X201D. Daniel didn't and X 2019. Returned to the forest for 3 days. Instead, he subjected himself to the slow torture of domestic normalcy. He and Victoria hosted her dinner party, and he watched her work the room with practiced charm, always performing, always measuring. He noticed things he and X 2019 learned not to see, how she never asked about his day, how she touched him only when others were watching, how their entire marriage had become a carefully constructed fiction designed for external consumption. On the 4th morning, he confessed everything. They were in their bedroom, Victoria applying makeup for a client meeting. Daniel sat on the bed, his heart hammering, and told her the truth. Not all of it and X 2014. He didn't and X 2019. Mentioned Kes specifically, but he told her about the affair of the heart that never became physical, his growing resentment, his sense that they were two strangers sharing a house and a last name. Victoria and X 2019. S face underwent a transformation so complete it was like watching a mask fall away. Her eyes, usually cool and calculating, filled with tears of genuine hurt. And X201C. You want to leave me, and X201D, she said flatly. And X201C. I want us both to be honest, and X201D, Daniel replied. And X201C. I and X 2019 am not happy. I don and hashtag X 2019. T think you are either. When was the last time you actually looked at me? Really looked at me? And hashtag X201D. Victoria sat down on the vanity bench, and something in her posture shifted. And hashtag X201C. I looked at you 7 years ago and fell in love with someone who was going to do great things, and hashtag X201D, she said quietly. And hashtag X201C, but then you chose safety. You chose comfort. You chose to disappear into your job and your regrets instead of fighting for your dreams. I wanted to love that version of you, but I couldn't and hashtag X2019, T. It was like being married to a ghost. And hashtag X201D. The words hung between them, brutal and true. And something shifted in Daniel and hashtag X2014. Not relief, but clarity. They weren't and hashtag X2019. T angry words. They were sad, reflective, and deeply honest. For perhaps the first time in their entire marriage, they were actually seeing each other. And hashtag X201C. I don and hashtag X2019. T want to hurt you and hashtag X201D, Daniel said. And hashtag X201C. You already are, and hashtag X201D, Victoria replied. And hashtag X201C, but maybe it and hashtag X2019, S the kind of hurt that needed to happen. Tell me about her. And hashtag X201D. Daniel did. He told Victoria about the forest, about Kes, about the way she saw through him and didn't and hashtag X2019. T judge what she found. He told her everything except the parts he couldn't and hashtag X2019. T name without sounding insane. When he finished, Victoria was quiet for a long time. And hashtag X201C. You need to decide what kind of man you want to be, and hashtag X201D. Victoria finally said. And hashtag X201C. Not for me, and not for this woman. For you. Are you someone who runs towards something, or just away from something? Because those are very different people, and I can and hashtag X2019. T follow you if I don and hashtag X2019. T know which one you are. And hashtag X201D. That night, Daniel packed a bag and went to the forest. Kes was waiting for him at their clearing, as if she and hashtag X2019. D always known he would come. She wore white this time, a dress that seemed to be woven from moonlight and spider silk. When he told her what had happened, she didn't and hashtag X2019. T looked triumphant or pleased. Instead, she looked sad. And hashtag X201C. Victoria loves you, and hashtag X201D, Kes said. And hashtag X201C. I know, and hashtag X201D. And hashtag X201C. And now you have to decide if you love yourself more than you love her. And hashtag X201D. Kes took his hand. And hashtag X201C. That doesn't and hashtag X2019. T means staying with her. It means being honest about why you and hashtag X2019. Relieving and being honest about what you want. And hashtag X201D. For the first time since he and hashtag X2019. D met her, Kes suggested they go somewhere other than the forest. She took him to a small cabin deeper in the woods, hidden and secret. Inside, there was a fireplace, warm blankets, and walls covered in photographs and maps. This was where she lived, or at least, where her physical form anchored itself to this world. Over the course of the next week, Kes told him the truth. She was and hashtag X2019. Ta foxwoman, not exactly. She was something older, a creature of the liminal spaces between wild and human. Centuries ago, she and hashtag X2019. D made a pact with a forest spirit. In exchange for the ability to read human hearts and guide them toward their truth, she would forever be bound to the places humans forgot, unable to exist fully in either world. And hashtag X201C. I cannot love a man who is running, and hashtag X201D. she explained as they lay together one night, her head on his chest. And X201C. I can only love someone who is walking towards something. And I need to know that you and X2019, re-choosing me from a place of wholeness, not from damage, and X201D. And X201C. And if I can and X2019, TB whole. And X201D, Daniel asked. And X201C. Then we and X2019, re not meant to be, and X201D, Kes said softly. And X201C, but I think you can be. I think Victoria was right. You have to decide what you and X2019, re-running toward. Not away from, and X201D. Daniel spent his days thinking. He thought about his father and X2019's judgment, his own capitulation to fear, his marriage that had become a tomb. He thought about Kes and whether he loved her or the feeling of being seen. He thought about art, which he hadn't and X2019 touched in 15 years, and about the smallness of his life by choice, not circumstance. And slowly, he began to understand what he needed to do. 2 months later, Daniel and X2019's divorce was finalized. He and Victoria had parted with unexpected grace, each acknowledging their role in the slow dismantling of their marriage. She had focused on her boutique and found a new partner, a woman who saw her clearly and loved her fully. Victoria told Daniel she was happy, and he believed her. Daniel had left accounting and enrolled in a graphic design program at night while working freelance. He attended therapy, not because Kes had demanded it, but because he and X2019 demanded it of himself. He learned to sit with his father and X2019's disappointment and choose his own path anyway. He learned that healing wasn't and X2019 something that happened to you. It was something you chose, over and over again, in small increments. He spent less time in the forest. Kes noticed, and she didn't and X2019 pretend to mind. And X201C, you and X2019, re-ready and X201D, she said one evening as they watched the sunset from the cabin porch. And X201C, ready for the world, not just for me. And X201D. And X201C. I love you, and X201D, Daniel said. And X201C, I know. But the question is, do you love yourself? And X201D. Daniel thought about this honestly. The answer was yes, but it was fragile, still growing yes. He was learning to love the parts of himself he and X2019 hidden. But he was also learning something else, that Kes had taught him what true sight meant, and now he could see himself without her magic. And X201C, can you tell me something? And X201D, he asked. And X201C, when you read my mind, when you see all my thoughts and desires and X2014, did you ever find anything that frightened you? And X201D. Kes was quiet for a long time. And X201C. Yes, and X201D, she finally admitted. And X201C. I saw a version of you that wanted to destroy your marriage, not to be free, but to punish Victoria for not being what you needed. I saw a man capable of deep cruelty if he stayed asleep. But I also saw someone willing to wake up, and X201D. And X201C. And now? And X201D. He pressed. And X201C. Now I see someone honest. Someone who and X2019 learned that freedom and responsibility aren't and X2019 opposites, and X201D, Kes took his hand. And X201C, I can be in your life, Daniel. but not as your salvation. Only as your companion. And only if you keep walking toward something, not toward me. And X201D. Daniel nodded, understanding now what she and X2019 D tried to teach him from the beginning. The power she wielded wasn't and X2019 T really magic at all. It was the radical act of seeing someone completely and loving them anyway. And the real magic was what happened when that person decided to love themselves back. As spring turned to summer, Daniel visited the forest less often. He was busy with classes, with work, with the slow, unglamorous process of building a life that was authentically his. But sometimes, on evenings when the wind moved a certain way, he would feel Kes and X2019's presence, her understanding, her quiet approval. And sometimes, he would return to the cabin to find her there, and they would lie together without pretense, two beings who saw each other and X2019's truths and chose each other anyway. The greatest gift she had ever given him was and X2019 the ability to be seen. It was the courage to stop hiding. And the wisdom to understand that sometimes the most unspoken truths are the ones we whisper to ourselves in the dark. Finally, with nothing left to lose and everything to gain.